Okay. Alright guys, this is part 2. Hopefully the audio's better. So, I don't know how much the viewers heard. But I guess I'll just go over it again. See, pretty much, I was sharing about my background and how from my mother's side I understood religion. From my father's side I understood more, in some sense, a sort of spiritual perspective. And then I came and lived in Canada and I understood the secular perspective. When I was really young, I saw this film. Me and my brother had seen this film with my father, and the film was like this alien movie. It was like, scary at the time. I remember I go up to my mother and I say, I'm afraid of like the dark and all of this. What should I do? And my mother says, say the name of God 7 times, which in Farsi is like Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, right? So every night where I would get paranoid out of my own imagination of what lurked in the darkness, I would just say the name of God 7 times and then I would relax and sleep. And then years went by, this habit was there in times of just basic prayer. Like I wasn't even religious, spiritual, very living a secular life up to 2011. But in any time where there was an emergency, something dangerous or something, you know what I'm saying? Something that I didn't know what to do, or I felt overpowered, or I felt there were forces in this, in the moment that were trying to conquer me, right? In those moments, I would call, in some sense, I would just 7 times say the name of God. So now, doing this as a strange hobby as a kid, right? I reached a point where every night where I was saying these 7 prayers, like the 7 names of God, I felt like I was knocking on a door. And I would count starting with my right pinky finger and go up to, the left index finger. And throughout just this whole thing, and then after 2011, I have a very unique experience, bunch of unique experiences follow up. I decided to then give the talks. Before giving the talks, I recorded and wrote a lot, right? People don't know this, but like I've written a ridiculous amount, which I don't know, for some reason, I haven't been, the logos hasn't moved me to in some sense get that out yet, Anyways, this experience of calling upon this higher force, when I was younger, I was just saying the name. I was just saying the words. There wasn't an experience. It was as if the context of what divinity can actually mean had not opened to my mind. But the synchronicities of life taught me well. And in 2014 up to 2016, I was a person who I would say I would do nothing if my intuition didn't command. That means I would check everything with my intuition. Socrates was known that when he went to the school, when he went to court, like the old men of Athens pretty much told him Socrates is teaching his own his own metaphysics to the children of Athens. And it was as if they were like, Socrates is spreading propaganda. We believe in the gods walking on clouds. Socrates is saying like God is like something deeper, And Socrates goes to court, and then this is written from like the perspective is being this incident is being shared from Plato's perspective. And Plato says that Socrates, that means from Socrates, as it's as if Socrates is saying it, that Socrates from the beginning of his life, every moment there was an inner oracle with him. And this inner oracle would tell him, it's okay, go here. It's not okay, don't go here. And he would listen to that inner oracle, and it was flawless. The ancients, we look at them like, yo, how did they have that ancient knowledge? Because internally they were experiencing a different reality. Their minds were open to something that has been veiled in the outer realms now. That means imagine 2 dimensions were 1 dimension back in the day, now they've become 2 dimensions. Truth divided, just like a single cell became 2 cells, it was as if like 2 universes emerged, 2 dimensions of in being emerged. Okay. So anyways, I've had this sort of experience, but I've never no, I shouldn't say never, but anyways, I had this experience with just saying these mantras, just chanting God's name. And it reached a point where 2014 to 16, I was listening to my intuition. And then at some point, I realized that I'm not a person. So imagine if your whole life you've thought you've had the karma of a persona, then imagine you suddenly realize you're not a persona. I reached a point where I was like, okay, the outer realms seem to be changing. I move a little part of it, the periodic parts of the periodic table that's like part of my body, like I move that. And it's as if consciousness leads through its most active experience, it's like from a mystical, let's say transmigratory Buddhist perspective. How would I say it? It's like, imagine this eagle catches like this squirrel, and the consciousness of that squirrel uses that experience to become an eagle, like its next incarnation, imagine. Okay. What can I say, guys? I'm just trying to share an experience where pretty much I felt so selfless that I was like, okay, what's living here? Or like from a theological standpoint, I pretty much reached this perspective where I'm like, okay, is it human beings here, or is God living through human beings? You know, I reached that conclusion to myself, and I'm like, okay, is this world God's life, or is this world man's life? Okay, and for a moment my mind entertained that what if this world is God's life? And then I thought it kind of makes sense. Like if you go to like your friend's house, you're not responsible for their house's furniture. So if you enter the world that you don't know who designed, in some sense it's as if you're not responsible for the furniture to some degree. But if you get an experience, I mean, this is why human beings have access to creativity. This is really it. We have an advanced access to creativity. This creativity allows our sense of being to know itself from multiple angles. If we get obsessed with one angle, we've missed the big show. This world is like a great happening, like a grand happening. It's like a great event. Now, some people are guests in the world, but for me, for example, like prophetic figures or like holy men in history, they were those who they were living in a different world. Like, people don't understand this. Religious people are living in a completely different world, but it's a world where there is way more authorization of interdimensional possibility. So what that means is really the philosophies, the ideological systems on this planet are all based on what angles of perception to reality they capture. When I say giving the soul back to God, that sentence actually is incomprehensible. Not because the soul is incomprehensible or the concept of God is incomprehensible, but just because if the soul is giving itself to God, what is giving itself to God, right? And so this is the reason I'm sharing this episode, and I'm saying it has a theological emphasis, is because for a moment my mind was like, yo, it's too big. Existence is too big. It's like this massive force, and it's like this concentric circles of minds. Like, people don't realize this. They think it's just human mind here. There's so many different events that are happening that in some sense, like, if we think human experience is the only thing going on, we're fools. We know nature has an arsenal of creation within it. Like, I don't know how to say it. Like, how many different types of species are there? How many different types of creatures are there? Now, is it too far-fetched to think like how many different kinds of worlds are there? I don't think it's a far-fetched idea. I feel the human species is realizing that it is now reaching a point where it requires to be multidimensionally, experientially responsible for its singularity of existence. What that means is your physicalness is a singular existence. It has the feeling of constancy. Do you know? Like right now, like if somebody comes and says apple, like in my inner realms I see the image of an apple. If somebody comes and suddenly somebody else comes and says orange, like I'll see the image of an orange. But if somebody comes and says like, yo, you know, you're fat, like I don't suddenly become fat. You know, if somebody says, oh my God, you're like Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's like, you know, I don't suddenly go, I'll be back. So what I'm trying to say, dear viewers, is that as someone who actually treated this world like a theme park of different perceptions and different systems that could arise, different cognitive approaches, what it is we're like this biological existential system, and then we're like this experiential cognitive system. The experiential cognitive system is using the physical reality as a starting point. People think that when we look at the world, we see the world, but we're actually looking at the canvas. Our free will draws the meaning on it. So when I say giving the soul to God, God is, at least the way I'm saying it, is inconceivable. For me, like, imagine a kid born in a country and being like, wait a minute, what is everybody worshiping? Like, I understand the beauty, the elegance, you know, the brilliance, but are we worshiping an inconceivable source. That means the concept of a source is conceivable, but the concept of the inconceivable is inconceivable. Do you know? So what I'm trying to say, it's as if religion is an ancient system to get man's attention to that which is beyond the sensory. Religion is like, I don't know how to say it, but it's like if the ego gets possessed, if your ego possesses religion, you are like an imposter. You will probably, your karma will make you feel like an imposter, you know. But if the religion possesses your ego, that's another way of saying like divine experiences, or you are experiencing moments where your own sense of being is being questioned in the sense of what sort of conceptual container is the energy of the moment having. Like, to me, I'm like, yo, like that guy on Matrix saw like codes on the screen, and you know what I see? I see actual geometry. Everything is lines. There is so many freaking lines in the world. Just if a person just stops and just looks at a moment, just look at something, just zone out and look at something like a distant building, you'll be fascinated by all the different colors, all the different lines. And what is consciousness doing? Consciousness is actually an intelligence that is geometrically functioning. I would say an interesting definition of consciousness is how space notices geometry. So anyways, when I say giving the soul back to God, like literally, conceptually, like that's meaningless. But the way I'm saying it is that I reached a moment where I'm like, okay, I have been trying things in my own way, right? I have been just, in some sense, just trying an approach, right? A strategy. Like I've been like this creature. I looked at reality and I implemented a strategy, right? So now the strategist is like, whoa, what if the strategy wasn't the correct strategy? What if a physical strategy to this life is not enough? What if a mental strategy to this life is not enough? To me, it feels like I am inside the mind of a universal being. And what the life force is, like, I remember I was looking at a bird and I was like, what is giving signals to the brain to move? Like just because the brain receives senses, like it's intelligent enough to move, you know? What I'm saying is, it's understandable the brain is receiving the sensory information, but the way we can select and classify and organize reality subjectively behind our eyes, that is not a physical being's ability. We are demonstrating non-physical ability and we're acting like we're physical creatures. And so many people are like, yo, is life filled with meaning? Is it meaningless? The meaning is subjective. The meaning is how your life force is interacting with reality. So anyways, this idea of giving the soul to God, giving your soul back to God, it's as if like the soul thought it was God and tried to act like God in the world. And when it realized it wasn't God, it wasn't the ultimate, then it was capable of realizing the ultimate. Do you see? There is no shame if right now, if this world of ours is interdimensional. Ancient perspectives have it this way, right? That there is so many different dimensions, so many different beings. If you look at Vedic mythology, Earth is in the bottom of the Mount Meru and there's 7 lokas, 7 upper worlds. And we're in the bottom of the Mount Meru. And the top of the peak, the summit of Mount Meru, the highest world, Brahma Loka, this is another way of saying that's God's house. That's God's reality. Anybody who reaches in Vedic thought, Brahma Loka, you're not reincarnated anymore. Why? Because you know better. You've been through it. For it's sure, let's say the human being's like, I don't know anything. Maybe that's why children cry, because they don't know anything. And this world is a teacher. I mean, karma is like the world teaching you stuff. You know? Your moment of being is really where it's at. Like, I understand, like, I could totally understand, like, the allure and the presence of holy men. Do you know? There's been people in history who, if I was alive at their time, I would just go and, like, in some sense, help them. You know, for me, there is a very strange feeling. In moments where I have tried to conquer something, I have felt that, you know, if you demonstrate cruelty in your attempt at conquest, or let's say you're trying to advance and you demonstrate cruelty, that moment you demonstrate cruelty, you have left your soul behind, poetically speaking. So be careful. Every being in this world, in any dimension you are, cruelty is in some sense like a shackle of the soul. You are chaining yourself. It's as if an unworthy god became a titan, and the titan became a beast, and the beast remembered its divinity. And this is all poetry. Really what it is like, you know, as somebody who's spoken, you know, who's communicated in this part of the universal sector, I would say that communication is just attention. Deep down, people are not thoughts. People are the attention to the thought. If somebody thinks I'm just my words, it's like, yo, it's like you were born like probably yesterday. Language is a system. I have no choice. I'm like this invisible, I shouldn't say invisible, but I'm like this space, or I would say I'm like this presence, this attributeless presence, where it's staring at attribute. And the free will is a power of solidification. So free will means you decide. Decision means context selection. A decision means you have selected a world to walk in. And so for me, I reached that moment where I was like, okay, if my body's changing, if my mind's changing, if everything in this world is changing, and if I try my best, and still, in some sense, it's like there's a feeling of being incomplete. I, for a second, was like, okay, God, if this is your world, if this world is your responsibility and man's soul is his own responsibility, do you know? Then in some sense, the awareness is really our job. The world is technically God's job. Do you know? That means the argument to be made that if man has a soul, how is he thinking that he's a body that has fallen? Do you see? I think like it's like that's the test maybe. Maybe this is the theological test, where God is waiting to see if man ever felt like he didn't do something wrong. You know, can you imagine, like, you know, God, like from, I mean, of course, I'm simplifying this, speaking about it very simply, but in a simplified way, but it's kind of like God looking at Adam and Eve after they've made the mistake, and it's like, yo, what do you guys have to say about yourself? And they didn't say anything. They didn't say like, yo, this snake told us something. It's like, what's the snake doing in the garden? You know, it's like, did you put the snake here? Like, the Adam and Eve did not question, right? They were just pure expressions of a different mind. You know, it's kind of like religion is another way of saying the origin of man's mind is not in this. The origin of man, the spirit, the animate force that is moving here is not from here, and it knows. And because it knows, it can experience bliss. We are performances of nature. We are, however, performances of nature that have become conscious of themselves. Now, imagine this creature, through evolution, unconsciously moving, as if it had no sense of self. Nature was pushing everything. Then it reached a point where it was like, yo, I am something. Look at my legs, look at my hands, look at my shadow, look at my reflection in the pond. And this creature started to notice itself. Now, after it noticed itself, it got locked into worship. So what that means is there was object worship. Then what happened? We moved on to subject worship. And you know what's scary? We're still in that subject worship phase. You know, we're not worshiping idols, we're worshiping ideas. Because if truth is beyond an idea, how can an idea define it? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, to me, this is still a paradox. I'm waiting to hear the insightful, commentary of certain theologians in the future, if I have the privilege, come and, it's like enlighten me on this topic. But to me, I have this bizarre, I have this unique perspective where I'm like, if religion, monotheistic religion, such as Islam, for example, is saying that God has no partner, that means there is nothing that can be God here. Okay, Christianity is, of course, has a different perspective, but I think Islamic perspective and Judaic perspective, it's that to them it's an inconceivable being. So if God is an inconceivable being, if you think a stone is God, oh my God, mistake. If you think if a person is God, it's like, that's like, oh yo, mistake, from the Islamic perspective. But if you think an idea is God, that's okay. What? It's like every objects were cool not being God, suddenly ideas can be God? I thought God was inconceivable. And so this is the bizarre thing that to me, and I don't mean to be rude, I'm just, as an honest being, sharing my perspective. Okay? It's as if God is it's like the holy books were like text. Imagine somebody sending a text message to someone and saying, like, meet me, I don't know, at this place, like, meet me at this restaurant. And imagine, instead of the person going to the restaurant, actually reading the message and understanding what it's about, the person just blindly reads the text message and they worship the text message and they never go to the restaurant, and they give their grandkids the text message to worship, and the grandkids are like, yo, who wrote this text message? Do you know? It's like, who did our grandfather talk to? We got to preserve this knowledge. Do you know? And I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm an observer. What else can I be? It's like, to be completely honest, we don't know what we are here, right? But our faith gives us a sense that we can know, or at least there is something out there that knows what we do not. For why else was the concept of God there? Because the loneliness of this world is very cruel. Emptiness has a different kind of cruelty. There's a cruelty of, like, let's say somebody being rude to you, that's still interaction oriented. But the cruelty of emptiness and the cruelty of karmic emptiness. Karmic emptiness means that you feel like you're in the wrong room. That's a sort of karmic exile. I don't know, I experienced that personally in my certain phases in my youth. Maybe some beings experience that too, maybe not, But it was a feeling as if I felt I didn't belong. Not belong, but I felt like my expression as a being was not authorized in front of my eyes. And behind my eyes, I had just treated imagination as unreal and didn't care about what was behind my eyes. Like, this is the biggest lie, right? The word imagination is so dangerous because it is generalizing something that is very multidimensional. Something that is it's not just thought going on. Something's noticing the thoughts moving. And that's your presence beyond your personality. Because your personality comes and goes. Like, how do you know you're a different person? Like, why is it that when we change, like, we didn't become a complete different person? It's like something in this world wants us to remember our journey. There is something about how we are journeying here and how we can notice we're journeying here that has it's like a significant clue. So I guess from a religious perspective, I pretty much, I realize that the intellect is very powerful, and a person's intellect can become very sharp if it can move at fast speeds. If a person can notice something very quickly, their mind is pretty much your inner realm speed up. Think of it this way. If you go to a familiar place, you're more comfortable. So if you were to run in that place, you'd run easier. The brain, I think, doesn't know what the outer realms is, so it's left to having faith in its own expression. Nature is brilliant. So, in order to add to the, let's say, mystical archives, I pretty much experienced the moment where I was like, okay, God, if you're here, I'll watch. What I mean is that it's as if like I was like, okay, where did my soul come from? Where is this force that is animating this talk coming from? Where is energy coming from? Was energy always here chilling? Do you know, could it be that time is like the biggest lie? All I know is that there's an intelligence here, and human beings can at least organize that intelligence within themselves, and if they work together, of course, the advanced humanity means that human beings have understood that there is a win-win possibility. And can you imagine waking up in a world where everybody's just advancing everything all the time? It would be an incredible world. It would be pretty much a world where everybody would be energized because every day we would be celebrating the advancements. Pretty much it would be an era of celebration cultures. Because really human beings, they're social creatures, and a lot of our events of joy are, in some sense, we are appreciating something bigger than us. Do you know? For example, people celebrate their birthdays. Why? Because they entered existence. What could be bigger than that, you know? And some people would be like, yo, Mr. Within, you know, it's like eternal being, you know, blowing birthday candles. You kidding me? So anyways, I just reached this moment, guys. You know, I'm just, you know, this is like just me talking very, very straight up. I just reached a point where I was like, the mind can move in infinite angles. There's so many ways to look at this life. That means, how do we choose out of all the ways that we can look at this world, like which way to look at, right? It's like an all-you-can-eat buffet of viewpoints, or all-you-can-see buffet of various angles to reality. And really, the human being, like, why are so many people searching for truth? Because they're like, yo, there's literally infinite angles. What do I do? There's so many ways of looking at the same thing. So this idea of giving the soul back to God means trusting your inconceivable source. What else can it mean? You see, this is the biggest difference, you know, in just the psychology of entities. If the entity feels under the effect of something, it doesn't feel worthy of a causal position. If the being is in a causal position, it's generating reality, it's given freedom to itself. It's another way of saying, like, the alpha archetype is a causal position. That means it's animating, it's moving the world, it's like the driver's seat. And the beta position is like the passenger seat. You know? Like, for example, you see this in wolf psychology. So I was like, okay, this world is like, if it's under the governance of, let's say, poetically higher dimensional intent, that means it's not like man trying to create artwork here. It's like all the other dimensions are also drawing artwork here. And of course, it comes to the nature of your own mind. You know, I mean, at some point I was like, okay, what do? Do I trust reality? Or do I distrust it? And then I realized whatever I do, it just keeps going forward. So really, I've reached a point where I was like, okay, the pressures of being an individual in this world, these pressures are like infinite, like so many different ways the creature can individualize. But how many ways can the being collectivize? There's usually one way. Remembrance. What if everything you want to be in this life, before this life you were being, and that's how you can be it? What if you knew before you were born that you knew? Something in those lines. You would not be living like a human being. You would experience yourself as a presence of the moment. You would notice that everything animating at all as an energetic event in the moment is raw divinity. Do you know? Like a bird lands on a branch, it's like, yo, it doesn't get more divine than that. You know, it's like suddenly the clouds move in the sky and they look like a face. It's like, oh my God, you know, the face of the sky. The sky's looking at me, you know. So yeah, that was the idea I wanted to share. That I have reached a point where physical reality seems to me like a lesser being, and subjective reality seems a bit more freer being. Like my mind, like this is strange, but if I was to classify, like if I was to compartmentalize, like in a unique way, my sense of being, I would say like my mission, my existential mission is complete any moment I exist. My experiential mission is complete, I personally approach it in this way, when I don't feel fear as a collective being, right? A person may have an individual fear. Like an individual fear is like your own death, okay? But a collective fear is like the death of the human species, and it's the death of the legacy of that which has endured so long. If we mess up, we are the greatest fools in the cosmos. This is why, to me, I'm like, politicians should stop playing games and they should all take off their shoes, go walk in, like, you know, the grass and sit under a tree, and for a second just pause their mind and be like, okay, I'm in a position of power. If I had already attained the ultimate, what would I do? Do you know, people say kindness is naivety. Kindness is the only sign that you have been liberated from this reality before. Kindness is the only, I don't know how to say it, but it's like, if you live a lifetime and you have been kind, like unkind, which I think it's impossible to live a life and not be kind at some point. But I don't know how to say it. Like, if you feel incomplete, you will usually obsess over power, right? But a completed being doesn't feel powerless. Do you understand? That means if there's somebody is like a trillionaire, let's say somebody's a powerful elite, like they go into their bank account and they're like, yo, do I see the infinity symbol there? Yo, nice. And so if there's someone who has that capability, just imagine the most powerful people existing on the planet right now, and imagine it's as if you have reached a level of completeness that no human being on earth has reached, and you feel so incomplete that you still have to control the world. Like, to me, it's so bizarre. It's as if the most powerful beings on this planet, like corruption is the sign that the most powerful beings on this, the most powerful entities, let's say status-oriented entities on this planet are incomplete. That means you become the most powerful being on this planet, you will still feel incomplete. Call yourself whatever top letter of the alphabet you want. Bless this world. Everybody is playing their part. You know, we're in some sense like a garden. We're all growing with each other, whether we like it or not. We're all existing. Like, I find it very fascinating that I'm existing in 2023 and 8 billion other beings are simultaneously existing. It's fascinating. It's as if, like, it's literally an airport where beings have emerged out of nowhere. It's like, you know, it's like you enter the airport terminal and you're like, what flight did I get off? And the flight was non-existence. You got off the flight of non-existence into existence. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, I've had moments, I'll share this with the viewers. This might I don't know, I'll just share it. I've had moments in this life where I have just stopped what I'm doing and I've just bowed to the moment. Simple. Just moments where I felt like, okay, I feel like a presence in the room. I feel my own presence in the room of manifestation. When you give something to someone, if you care for what you're giving, in order to give, you require trust. And to give your soul back to God is like, what level of trust do you need to have to trust an inconceivable state of being? That is a very advanced being. Faith is like similar to alien technology. You know, like that advanced of a technology to me, even way, you could say even more, right? There's certain narratives, this is more in the realm of fiction, like fictional fantasy stories, but in certain fictional fantasy stories, like, you know, there was this hero king, and this hero king reincarnated, you know, in this next lifetime, and this king had it in his past lifetime, in the world he was in, there was a divine presence. That means the world had a divine presence, and the divine presence of the world hadn't left the world yet. Okay? So this guy in his next reincarnation in this fictional show suddenly feels like there is no divine presence, like there is no god or goddess archetype in the world, in the realm. Like people don't have access to, let's say, divine ability as one word. D-I-V-I-N ability, divine ability. Yeah, that's a cool word, divine ability. You're like a suggestion to an ability that comes from a realization that divinity is realizing that we are not, like, we're not everything, but everything is kind of being us. Like existentially, I'm existing in a, like, as a universe, but experientially, you know, I'm just some podcaster. So what I'm trying to say, dear viewers, is I just had a moment where I felt like I don't know. I genuinely felt like I don't know anymore. Do you know? I felt like, no, let me tell you what I felt. Not that I don't know, just that it's like I reached infinity. And you know, it's like when you reach infinity, you don't know what to do. And that's where I would say the divine authority is necessary. Because if you have infinite options, you don't know which to select. But if you're not the main selector, then faith becomes your selection. I'm just saying that for the first time, I have reached the state of mind where I am not trusting, not just having faith in my own invisible self, unknown self, not in the unknown self of like my mind, let's say, like concepts I see, but I'm starting to notice that a complete system cannot be incomplete. Okay, so what I mean by that is that everything is happening. So from the context of happening, everything is complete. If somebody wanted to build a changing world, it's like slow hand clap, we're in it. It's so beautiful. We are literally the voices of the world. We are the minds of this universal sector. And there will come a time where man will know himself at a speed that is so close to instantaneity that he will not even need a body. So what that means, it's like a non-physical mind experiencing a physical body through a Cartesian mind-body dualism. And so this non-physical mind is limitless to itself. It's like our eyes are from this limitless dimension. So when they are in a limited dimension, they know that they can move it. So it's another way of saying Those who notice their limitations, it's kind of like what Andy Warhol said, when you go to the edge, you see things others cannot see. You see how the edge of the world behind your eyes and the edge of the world in front of your eyes is like a round circle. And it ultimately comes to presence. So I would say that I think I have become a being that is no longer a personality to myself. Like it's not complete, you know? Like it's incomplete. I'm more in this state where I'm like, okay, you know, in a lot of these talks I say, you know, I've had experiences where I've felt I have met the unknown presence of the moment. And in those moments I knew that the jurisdiction of what is happening, like the karma of the moment, is not from just my mind. You know, this is kind of bizarre, but it's like what is looking through our eyes is a team. But these ideas, they're too early now. Maybe like 200 years from now, people will start becoming conscious of multiple senses of selfhood simultaneously, which would be like very advanced. It would be like watching 3 films at the same time in like 3 screens. Do you know what I'm saying? It would be like experiencing 3 senses of, like, multiple senses of self simultaneously, not like sequentially. Because the moment you see somebody has fragmented self, where like one day there's something, the other day something, like, do you know what I'm saying? That's still sequential. That means they have enough sanity for sequential acknowledgement. That means they're sane on some level, right? But when reality, that you don't care about its sequence, or you in some sense, like, I don't know how to say it, but it's more like, I feel like I've experienced my body. I feel like I've experienced my mind. Now when it's come to the, let's say, the finale of the soul, I'm realizing that the soul is like watching infinity. It's like the void noticing infinity. Noticing it's infinite. You know, there was a discussion on Discord about the idea of, like, are we in this world to suffer or not? And I remember saying, like, it doesn't make sense if, like, we evolved 4.5 billion years. Like, imagine how much of evolution was unconscious, and then when it, like, we evolved so just we could notice the suffering conscious. Like, it seems like a ridiculous strategy, right, for a creature to bring for itself consciousness of pain. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like an anti-survival strategy, actually. Consciousness doesn't make sense. Yeah, consciousness doesn't make sense, because consciousness is access to pain, to noticing your pain, right? To noticing, like, your suffering or pain or joy or whatever. So what I'm trying to say is, if a being doesn't know, or how would I say it? It's like, imagine in evolution, the creature was moving unconsciously, and when it became conscious, like, imagine it could have been like a mistake moment, maybe. Or maybe not. Maybe that was the intent, of course. I mean, when somebody talks about the ancient past, we're left with, you know, the creative imagination of, you know, historic curiosity. The world is filled with so many different colors, so many different shapes, so many different possibilities, which our mind can probabilize, can project. What I'm trying to tell the viewers in this episode is that if there was a concept of, like, the invisible other, when I noticed, like, for example, let's say the idea of the divine other, I was like, okay, like Swami Krishnananda, this guy, even though, you know, he comes from a yogic tradition, he says religion is God remembering himself. And what that means is it's like man is here for God. Is man here for God, or is God here for man? That's a very deep question. I think that's one of the deepest theological questions that could be asked. Because if man is here for God, then we are not the ultimate decision maker. But if God is here for man, then man's decisions are like crucial, essential. You know, I've decided, you know, I'm going to even just write from this moment on. I mean, like, what are the options? I could distrust this world. I can fear this world. I can hate this world. You know, I could dislike this world. Or I could just be like, all right, I'm in the game. I'm on the soccer field. I'm wearing the jersey, the human jersey. Now, what's the goal? And this is the cool thing. The goal that we all need to score is in some sense the advanced civilization. The idea of the advanced civilization is the greatest idea in the outer realms. I've made this declaration. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I appreciate the viewers. And I appreciate the ears of the universal sector. Whoever you are, you know, I don't think fear, suffering, even depression and sadness and all this stuff, that doesn't seem to be like why this world is here. It doesn't make sense that we're here to suffer, but it does make sense that the suffering is here to make us notice greater dimensions. I would say that we need to have a new perspective on humanity, and we've been treating ourselves as nouns, but for the first time, the advanced humanity is going to be a sort of verb. That means it's like 8 billion nouns suddenly decided to become a next level verb. You know? And so ultimately, I don't know, I mean, so far this is the way I've experienced it, where I was like, okay, I don't know. Truth. If you've been here before I have, then efficiency is an ideal way. So what I mean by giving the soul back to God is a moment where the person realizes their self cannot satisfy, their individual self cannot just satisfy, you know, the presence of this world. And so one tip I will give to all the mystics and philosophers in the future: for a moment consider if everything is alive. Everything. I have reached a point where I was like, yo, is space alive? It's like, space, can you hear me? And then, you know, I noticed like I'm hearing him. I'm hearing my own voice. Anyways, guys, blessings. I would share this in my writings. I've talked about this, that to me, I feel humanity should have a sort of heritage attitude and museum attitude to all the great ideas, right? Like, we have wonders of the world, which are in some sense like the pyramids of Egypt, and we have wonders of literature. We have wonders of of the inner realms. And I would say religions of this world and all the ideological systems technically are worthy to, in some sense, be in the museums of the future. Okay, now this doesn't mean, like, you know, it's kind of like just like human beings are like the same thing they're doing with their genetics, they're doing with their ideological systems. We reproduce and the gene passes on and continues. Similarly, human beings in ideological systems, generations and generations keep passing down the same the same ideological code, right? That's the whole point of like religious accuracy, right? But I'll tell you, if truth was words, if the moment you had read the holy book, you should have been in paradise. So truth is beyond a conceptual level, and if we are to wonder about a direct experience, I feel like many people from religious circles may agree that the true intent of religion is man's connection to the source that is sponsoring his livelihood, right? So in some sense, it's like there's an energy here, and we're like, yo, how did it get here? And then the person's like, yo, what if, we think we were born alone, but we never could? What if before anything existed, the world wasn't alone? Timeless eyes couldn't go anywhere. And so when you give your soul back to God, it's another way of saying you realize before you were an individual, there was a collective presence to truth. Once you appreciate this collective presence, you will see it within others. Once you see it within others, you will suddenly realize all the divine unknown variables you have seen to your own consciousness in various modalities exist for other people. We are not just known personalities to ourselves, we're also unknown angles to of our own intelligence. And I would say, if man is not in charge, if this world, like imagine this world is like a video game, and you can't pass this video game until you meet, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like the game master or something. I've had a very peaceful day ever since finding this title, like coming to the experience of this title. I've just been like, all right, life, show me what you are. Show me how you are alive. Because I have realized my life to be selfless, which is another way of saying that every time I blink, every time I go into deep sleep, or even consciously close my eyes, or go into some daydream state, but I shouldn't say daydream. Let's say every time I blink, every time I go into deep sleep, it's as if there is no self. This is the easiest way, right, to prove that we're not our ideas. Because in deep sleep there is no idea. That means we can exist without ideology. But at the same time, the ideology is the next level. It's like it's the addition. It's like it's the next chapter. But now we're reaching a point where beyond ideology, people are going to be like, okay, Mr. Within, you're talking about an advanced civilization. Oh my God, my laptop's going to die. Okay, so people say, Mr. Within, you talk about an advanced civilization. What are the means to get to it? Pretty much what it is you have to wonder and ask yourself if you want to see and you want to consciously get to see your most advanced self in this lifetime. For me, my advanced self brought me to a point where from the unknown, I stared at the infinite and I realized that the ego's limitations of authority. And really what the concept, like the word Islam, for example, means submission. And it's a suggestion of surrendering your ego in the presence of a greater truth. But to me, knowing truth, feeling true, and realizing that consciousness is an opportunity, it has a momentum, we can add to the momentum. Imagine, I will make a prediction. Here, I'll say something, I think this is theoretically plausible. If let's say tomorrow we woke up and every person on the planet was till the end of time, or let's say they were kind, I would say after 100 days, there would not be only world peace on earth, but our civilization would advance ridiculously advance. If everybody was kind, and people would be like, what is kindness in a world where resources are scarce? Kindness means that we're all living in one room and everybody wants to dance and the room's crowded, so if everybody starts to dance, like let's say at the same time, or I don't know how to say it, but like it's like the person wants to dance, they go to a different part of the dance floor where there's more room, so if they dance their hands don't hit people. You know what I mean? Like imagine you're doing an air track, like a breakdancing move. So anyways, thank you for listening. Share, subscribe, comment, like, join. And above all, enjoy the incredible opportunity to experience yourself as part of the most advanced team, the most advanced species in this universal sector. That means if the world was Morpheus, the human species is Neo. Morpheus has found Neo. Rise, mankind, rise. Or free your mind. Blessings, guys, blessings. Namaste. Thank you for listening. Namaste.